What should college, university athletes be doing right now if you were to say, hey, these are the first 3 things that you should do if you are an athlete on campus wanting to monetize on your name, image, and likeness? Mark Koesterer, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm super excited to dive into your story, both as an athlete, now helping athletes, educating the next generation. Maybe just start off by letting our listeners know who you are, what you've done over the past couple decades in the sport industry. Pretty influential individual, to say the least.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the invite and the opportunity to share our story, and excited to share with your audience. So, yeah, my background is born and raised on Long Island in New York. My father was a junior high gym teacher, oldest of 3 kids, and he taught me at a very early age that there was probably a good chance I could use athletics to better my life. In other words, get a college opportunity. He wasn't even concerned about scholarship, but could I get to a school that maybe I would not be able to get to academically because of sports? So using sports to get to a school above your goals. And so I was able to do that, and made best friends of my life 40 years ago. Still talk to them a couple times a week, and we just have grown together as friends and family. And then I was able to take my father's message and actually increase it and expand upon it, and that was to use athletics to better the lives of the people around me. And by that I mean I was very much dedicated to athletics in the community. I helped build a youth lacrosse program, actually, that grew to 4,000 kids.
Wow.
And then a community program that turned into a high school team that has won 2 state championships, put 200 kids to college. So always been involved personally with athletics. 15 years ago, I was given an opportunity to come here to California and to work in a company called Sports Studio. And at Sports Studio, we had the coolest job of everybody. At every party, you're supposed to be the coolest person when you work at Sports Studio, because we produce television shows, movies, and commercials, but the sports aspect. So we did, hundreds of movies and television shows, and we were the licensed partner for the NFL, NBA, MLB, the big major sports leagues here in North America. And so, we worked with athletes and brands, and we worked with agents, and we worked with, partnerships between athletes and sports. And we sold that company in June of 2021. And July 1st, 2021, a little spider sat down beside me, and it was name, image, and likeness, commonly referred to as NIL.
So all of that lacrosse, the stuff that you mentioned previously, that was done in New York before coming out to California. You talked about it before we started recording, having the Mets, Jets, and Nets. Such a cool aspect to have that team growing up. You watched them win the World Series in '69. What was it like for you having your dad come in and say, hey, the sports is something that can transform your life and take you places? Did you think about that at the time and was like, oh, this is what I'm going to have to do? Or was it over time you recognized, like, oh, this is opening doors for me?
Yeah, I don't think I had any idea. Like all kids, we didn't really listen to our parents probably as much as we should have. For me, I thought he meant I had to get on my bike and ride to the other side of town to play basketball,
Okay.
But when I got to college, I was like, oh, these kids come from different places. This is going to be interesting. Different walks of life, different backgrounds, different academic, different athletic experiences, different parts of the country. I played Division II football at a small school called Hillsdale College in the Midwest. We were a very good Division II program, but we were by no means Michigan State, Ohio State. We were not that level, but no less dedicated and no less interesting stories on and off the field in college.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Okay, maybe you can answer this question for me. Where is the Midwest defined? Because we just drove 2 weeks from Toronto to LA, and I swear everywhere from Michigan to Nevada, people were clarifying and calling it the Midwest. So is there an actual?
I'm sure there is. My line of demarcation, I guess, would be the Mississippi River. So east of that is the Midwest.
Okay.
Yeah, I think because then you get to the Great Plains and then you get to the Rockies, I guess.
So you also mentioned you've got 200 plus athletes now who have taken the Players NIL educational course. How has that grind that you referred to it as been? I mean, you've got now an opportunity, a blank slate, frankly, that you can showcase what you're offering. How many athletes are you looking to impact? What's the goal? What was the inspiration? Obviously, you had these previous sports endeavors, but like, why do this after selling that company? Like, what's the drive to continue doing it?
So a couple of questions there. So it's not a complicated answer, but there's several answers. So first of all, during this, in 2021, my father passed away.
Okay.
And so in writing, thank you, in writing his obituary, it took me 4 pages for a junior high gym teacher. All of the community service, all the activities, all the people that he influenced. And the word that was stuck with me during the eulogy was legacy. And when we sold Sports Studio, I thought to myself, what's your legacy going to be? And what I mean by that is not to be obnoxious about it, but if you died tomorrow, would anyone care?
No, that's right? A real question to ask.
And so I wanted to make sure. I thought I had a pretty good legacy with my community work, my kids, my business, the leadership and the mentorship that I provided. So I was really happy with where we were and what we were doing, but I thought we could do more. And so I dove into name, image, and likeness, not knowing anything about it, and really thought I was going to become what is now the majority number of companies in the business, and that was an agency to represent brands or to represent athletes, which is a business that I understood.
Right.
But it was also a business that I did not like because it was more of the same that I saw in Hollywood, where big brands and adults were taking advantage of kids, almost a predatory type situation. We read about all the stories about athletes that weren't taken care of off the field, financially, emotionally, mentally, physically, and when they were done playing, they disappeared and no one ever heard from them again. So the answer to the question is, I thought I could change thousands of people's lives through education. And name, image, and likeness creates an opportunity. And the challenge is, not only am I trying to build a business from scratch, I'm trying to do it in an industry that didn't exist 16 months ago.
Yeah.
So I'm creating a whole new vertical in a whole new world. And so, we think we're the leader out of the clubhouse in terms of our intentions and our curriculum and what we've built, but we have a long way to go.
You're paving the way, at least. And from what I've seen, your content looks incredible. We were just chatting with Chase Griffin, UCLA's quarterback, who's got 30-plus NIL deals currently. What should college, university athletes be doing right now if you were to say, hey, these are the first 3 things that you should do if you are an athlete on campus wanting to monetize on your name, image, and likeness?
Well, let's take a step back and think about what name, image, and likeness was really meant for. It was meant for every student athlete. It was meant to help athletes pave their way through college, pay their way through college, pave their way to success after school as well, from a personal brand building standpoint. We've sensationalized the first 16 months. We talk about the Chase Griffins, we talk about the Bryce Youngs, we talk about the CJ Strouds, the big athletes who are getting millions of dollars because we sensationalize that. But I like to think that that's the top 2%. Those are the schools and the big power brokers that have unbelievable resources and opportunities. That's not the majority of the kids. The majority of the kids, the 98%, are kids, that just are going to school. They may even be paying their way. They may be on partial scholarship. They may be non-scholarship because they're Division III student athletes or junior college athletes. And so the answer to the question is, there's a deal out there for everyone. And I don't care if it's $100 or $1,000, okay, or $10,000. But depending on your commitment to what you want to do, depending on your interest and depending on what you want to do, there's a deal for you. So we've designed this 5 pillars coursework really as a life skills program, right? And we have developed a mentality where we want to take kids from age 16 to 61 and create a center of excellence that not only supports them during their college decisions, age 16 through 18, but also through college and post-career guidance as well. So what do you do when the ball stops bouncing? So mental health, job creation, partnerships, think of a community for athletes post-career.
Love that. When Todd reached out, Todd Grassley, to have this conversation, I thought it was a no-brainer, obviously, with what you guys have been doing in the space. Guy Reggie Ford, who we chatted with at Vanderbilt University, wasn't a perennial all-star, nothing spectacular, but he was a hometown kid who decided to go to Vanderbilt because he was that hometown. He had those roots. And he said if NIL was around when he was a kid, he would have been able to pay for school just because of the relationships that he had from a homegrown perspective. What suggestions do you give to those athletes who aren't maybe the top 2%? They are the 98%. how should they be going about conversations with brands, getting their name out there? Should they be posting on social media? I'm sure it's all in your course, but maybe some tidbits of information that you can leave listeners with so that they can apply it and then say, oh, I need to go check out Mark's course in more detail.
Right. So pillar one is digital marketing and personal branding. And so it's about telling stories. I worked in Hollywood for 15 years. Every television show, every movie, every commercial, it tells a story. We use sports to tell a story. Someone scores a touchdown, that's a story. Someone drops a pass, that's a story. Someone scores a goal, someone saves a goal. Those are different stories. They tell different stories. But it's all about being relatable and creating an audience and telling a story that people are interested in. So you may have an interest in art or science or math or travel or food or fashion or cars or sneakers. Besides being an athlete, how are you going to engage? So the point that I'm trying to make is, building a personal brand and creating a following is not taking pictures of everybody at the lake on Sunday and saying, yeah, I got a lot of friends and family. No, we're talking about increasing that beyond your normal reach, okay? So once you do that, then pillar two is influencer and brand relationships. What are brands looking for? And there's two silos of money in name, image, and likeness today. The first silo we'll talk about is essentially what these big 2% athletes in the Power 5 schools are getting, and that is, they're using the term collective. Essentially, it's the booster clubs on steroids, okay? It's all of the people that have a personal interest or business interest in the success of the program. And that's fine. That's within the rules of name, image, and likeness. I think the founders of name, image, and likeness did not predict that collectives would be so powerful, so it's taken people by surprise. So that's one silo. The other silo is a real brand relationship. It's you do something for me, I'm going to pay you, right? And typically, in the first 12 months of NIL, 73% of all brand deals were around social media.
Okay.
Wow. So, like it or not, the Kardashians have changed the world, right? Influencer relationships. And having been in advertising and telling stories through commercials in Hollywood and with New York agencies, I can tell you that I believe, my personal opinion, is that advertising has changed forever. I think big brands are going to look and say, I can make a $14 million commercial. It could play at halftime of next Sunday's, Aaron Rodgers Green Bay Packer game, right? I could take half of that money and pay a bunch of college kids to influence their circle. And by the way, we now have technology where I know exactly who your audience is. I know what their habits are. I know where they go, where they shop, what they do, what they like. And I can select the people that I choose to get to my audience. And so I think influencer relationship is here to stay. NIL is an example of that. And so the answer is, I tell kids, I speak to kids all over the country. I say, really simple. I want you to keep a log for the next 24 hours. And I want you to write down every brand that you see. Whether you're drinking something, eating something, walking past somewhere, driving something, riding on something, getting on a bus and seeing signs, make a list of all those brands. And then think of the brands in that list that you interact with, that you actually consume or partake in. That's probably your best, most organic relationship, rather than you like Coca-Cola, but I'm going to sell Pepsi because they're going to pay me. Well, the audience is going to see right through that.
Right. Yeah. And that's a tough dynamic to have to figure out, because you're like, hey, this brand's offering me $1,000 to make an Instagram post and shout out their product, but I've never used it before and I don't know whether I actually like it. Well, that's not going to help anyone, because that brand's now going to have a negative image associated with everyone who watched your content. I watched Emily Cole, who's on Duke University, track athlete. She just got Dick's Sporting Goods, probably a major player, probably part of that collective that you talked about as well. Are there any issues that you see with NIL coming over the next year or two outside of the collective that's really impacting athletes negatively?
I don't think, as a general rule, NIL is negative. I think some of the players in the business may be negative. I think there are deals out there that are not organic. And I think people are going to realize that that was not the right deal, even though the $1,000 seemed really good at the time. The problem is, what contract did they sign? Does that brand now own their life rights? Have they given away the opportunity to make money for the rest of their, social public career for $1,000? Right. So I think education is really important around that. Okay. I think long-term success for student athletes post-career, the 5 pillars that we teach are life skills that they need.
Yeah.
right? They need to understand what are lifetime rights, what is intellectual property, what does the term of payment mean, really simple things. I'm not trying to teach anybody how to be a lawyer, but you ought to at least be able to have a conversation with your lawyer or someone that's reviewing your contract. Pillar 4 is community service, which is my father's pillar, and I just think it's good for mental health.
For sure.
I think we ought to have balance because we're so focused on athletes, success, and what happens when it's over? If your whole self-worth is around sports and it's taken away from you, where are you at? And then the fifth pillar, which every young person should take, and maybe most adults, is financial literacy.
Yeah.
Right? Just basic things. So that's what I would say. But I would say the scariest part to me is how young it's going. It's going into high school and even junior high now.
Did you see LeBron James' son just signed with Beats by Dre?
Well, that's a little bit of a unique situation, but
hey, he's in high school.
Yeah.
Like, that's crazy. I can't remember the number, but like, what is he, 15, 16 years old?
He's actually, I think, a junior. He might be a senior in high school now. So,
okay, so
he's
17,
in the wheelhouse.
So, okay.
Yeah.
So what is the youngest that you've seen? Like, I have a cousin who's 15, 16 years old playing hockey, who's going to be a stud goaltender. Like, are brands considering that before they even get to that point? They want to get their foot in the door?
I think worse than brands, I think parents are looking for it. Right?
Okay.
And so I'm writing a book, and the title of the book is 12-Year-Olds Win for All the Wrong Reasons. It's about good parenting gone bad.
Okay.
And I worry that these kids are going to be used as pawns by families that think they can get money off of them, and they're going to make deals that aren't in their long-term interest, and it's going to not really support them long-term.
So you had 5 kids yourself. You've gone through playing NCAA yourself, Division II. Your kids were athletes. What kind of impact would NIL have had for you and your kids growing up through the process?
Well, I don't know that I'm really very social, so I don't know that I would have succeeded. But I was a good salesperson in terms of I'm a good networker and I know a lot of people. And, I think I probably would have had some success with some local companies, friends and family that I knew. And my kids, I think, 10 years ago, they would have had some success with it for sure.
Do you think that there's an opportunity for those athletes who are a younger age? And I don't even know the answer to this. Like, how would you suggest a 15-year-old or a 14-year-old to be like, hey, don't listen to your parents because they might not have your best interests at heart? Like, how do you manage that?
That's a tough one. I think there's so much pressure, and there's so much peer pressure, and now there's money.
Yeah.
We've seen it in basketball for years, these AAU teams, right, that are sponsored by big, mostly shoe brands, and the pressure to get on those teams. And even club soccer here in the United States, it's almost overcome high school athletics because it's become a business.
Yeah.
Right? And the fun has kind of been taken away from it. And I worry about these kids that are successful at a young age. That's why 12-year-olds win for all the wrong reasons, right? They grew faster. They had more coaching and more equipment. It doesn't mean that they worked harder. It doesn't mean that they're more talented. It doesn't mean that at age 16, they won't be the tallest person, So I worry about young kids, and I don't know the answer. I would hope that our school system would provide some education and some support, but I know there's a tremendous amount of pressure, especially in the minority communities where kids are trying to get out.
For sure. Well, and that's their way to get out and to put food on the table for their family, and they probably think that at the time it's the best thing since sliced bread because they do have that ability to impact their family positively, right? And man, I just think about the variables at play, and I hope that our education system does do that. I don't know, maybe the Players NIL has something up their sleeve, and that's going to be something that you try and get into at the younger age and get into high school curriculums. But you talked about leaving a legacy, and I'm curious, if you were to fast forward 50 years from now, what do you want that legacy to be for you, and what do you want people to think of, like those words that describe you and your legacy and what you left the world with?
Well, I hope that, our athlete-focused center of excellence in 50 years has these 18, 16-year-old kids still involved, in life skills, in community building, in giving back, right? I hope that my legacy, my personal legacy is set, but I hope that the company legacy is that we changed thousands of people's lives and then became force multipliers to change their families' lives. They've used athletics to better, the people around them.
Right. do you still play any sports yourself? Are you a golfer? I know you were football growing up, but like anything now, you seem like you're in good shape.
Well, when you live in California, it happens to you. But I'm a swimmer and a bike rider, but nothing really competitive at this time.
Okay. Does the competitive juices start flowing when your kids start biking and swimming beside you?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Who's winning?
It depends on what the activity is.
Okay.
I get them in the fitness, but not in the strength and the speed.
Oh, okay. Interesting. You got the old man strength, right? Like that's the.
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
Mentally tough.
I'm not calling you old. That would be terribly rude of me to do on a podcast. What do you, when you think of the next 6 months with all the changes that are coming, Fed interest rates are hiked, like there's going to be a lot of financial difficulties over the next year. And you talked about financial literacy as that fifth pillar. I'm trying to think of how I can make sure that people have actionable steps to take after listening to this show, that they can say, hey, I now am comfortable with my financials to have a conversation with someone around what I'm going to be receiving. Like, are there resources out there other than the Players NIL that you would look to or suggest in the meantime for them if they can't afford or...
Yeah, so I've built my whole company. We launched January 12th of 2022, so 9 months ago. And I've done it through over 400 Zoom meetings. Wow. And just talking to people and listening and reading. And I think there's a lot of information out there. You have to be careful of the source. I think there's a lot of things on YouTube, not to plug YouTube, but YouTube is an amazing resource. Sure. And I've learned how to build a online educational company by watching 170 hours of YouTube, So educate yourself. And it doesn't have to be the Players NIL course. Our retail price is $249. It's 5 hours of education. And then we have additional programs where we're going to take a deep dive into podcast and website and logo design and NFT creation and lots of deep dive entrepreneurial things. So okay. I would say educate yourself. Make sure that you have checks and balances on any documents or agreements that you go into, and just try to be smart about it.
What's the social media platform every athlete should be on?
Well, right now, TikTok's the hottest thing in the world,
mm-hmm.
right? I think they say it's a new Google. Like
mm-hmm.
people are using it to research. So from a marketing standpoint, TikTok is huge, but Instagram is too, and Reels in particular. Video outperforms still photography,
mm-hmm.
always will probably. And so I think those two. But, it depends on what your audience is, and it
mm-hmm.
depends on what you're comfortable with. I think, like athletics, I think if you're funny and smart and you're telling a fun story, people will find you.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think the other one that a lot of athletes are jumping onto now is LinkedIn. Despite it having a business stigma around it, there's a ton, and the organic reach is scaling. And if you're a good writer, which a lot of people are, they're in school, and if they don't want to be putting their face on the camera 24/7, it's a good alternative option to still build your brand. So athletes, don't sleep on LinkedIn. Make sure you're on that.
I agree.
Yeah, because you're on there. You're active. Yeah. You're finding that. Is that where you would suggest athletes to potentially get in contact with those brands to source those deals, like reaching out to decision makers?
Yeah, absolutely. I think LinkedIn is a peer-to-peer platform. It's probably not a social platform. But if you want to be recognized by brands or industry leaders or community leaders, for sure, LinkedIn, 100%, I believe in it.
Interesting. It's a good one. We're trying to build everything, but it's a grind, like you said. Even though we're 149, this will be 151, which is crazy. You're 30 episodes into your podcast. Tell me what it's been like for you doing that over Zoom, chatting, having those conversations.
Yeah, it's great. And we try to do three things, right? One is, what is your relationship to sports? Just an interesting background. And I use two words, sports and athletics, and they're not the same.
Okay.
So sports is the fandom part. What's the first game that you went to? Who'd you go with? Grandma, grandpa, the neighbor, Uncle Jerry, whoever it was. Athletics would be when you started participating. Okay. And so those are two different words. And then how that shaped you. What was your youth like? When did you realize that you could use sports to better your life? Whether it be, college or whatever your goal was, or even if it was just business, right? That you were interested in athletics, or that you were going to meet people through athletics, right? So I think that, that's really important. first part of it. The second part is, I asked them what are they doing now, how have they used their experiences, and then the third part is advice. Because I think there's a lot of people that have been through a lot of experience. I've had professional athletes, Olympic athletes on. I had a Super Bowl champ a couple weeks ago, Chris Hogan, who was too young for name, image, and likeness, but now is very active in social now that he's retired. And he says that he was, really focused on his career, didn't even think about making money off the field, but missed an opportunity.
I just saw a Reggie Bush commercial for USC, and I'm like, holy Dinah, you haven't heard that name in a while. You mentioned the sports versus athletics, and you mentioned going to that first event. Do you remember that first event or a memorable event, who you went with that sticks out in your mind other than that 69 World Series win?
Yeah, it was probably the New York Yankees. My father took me to a Yankee game in the late 60s, and Joe Pepitone was the first baseman. I wasn't a huge baseball guy, but I remember that. But I would say it was more interesting. My father was a adult athlete, so he played flag football and softball.
Okay.
And I remember going to those games and seeing the competitive juices and the athletes and all of that, and I just became mesmerized with competition.
Isn't it the best?
Yeah.
I love competing. Phoenix will attest to this. I'm the most competitive board game player you will ever meet. I don't like to lose. It's a thing. How do people apply that competitive nature both on and off the field? Because a lot of people will apply it on the field, but then won't bring it when it comes to name, image, and likeness deals, when they're trying to source that, get that additional money in their pockets. There's got to be that competitive juice that you want to go out and seek and build your own brand. How do you get that transfer of energy so that it's not all spent on the field or training or on social media wasting time?
Yeah, look, we all know people that are super competitive, and now I know one more. And we know those that maybe aren't, or they're not overtly competitive, but they never give up, right? And I think that's what athletics can teach you if you allow it to, is adversity. And I don't think today's kids have enough adversity, and they don't know how to fight through adversity. So I think, whatever you can do to fight through adversity and to never give up, and to just find a solution. There's nothing, we had a little problem with electronics here when we started. We could have said, well, that's it, we can't have a podcast, or we could fix the problem.
Yeah.
Right? Find a solution.
Yeah.
I always told my salespeople in business, it's okay to say no to a customer. Just say, no, I can't do that, but I can do this. And I think athletics hopefully gives you, no, that isn't working. Let's try something different in business and in life.
So true. The power of sport is just not even comprehensible when I try and describe it to people, or when we ask what those impacts are. You mentioned adversity. What other lessons do you learn from athletics, sports, that you can apply to everyday business life, social?
Yeah, well, I think the obvious ones are, discipline.
There you
right?
go. Okay.
Consistency. I had a college coach that said, take care of the little things, and the big things will take care of themselves. And I think there's lots of lessons. I think about, we're here in California, and the famous basketball coach John Wooden. He had his, he had his principles, and he would take his team every year first practice and teach them how to put their socks on so they didn't get blisters. In those days the shoes weren't very comfortable, and they wore special socks or two pairs of socks so you didn't get blisters. But he knew that if someone got a blister and missed practice, it was going to affect the team. Yeah. So take care of the little things, and the big things will take care of themselves. Consistency, discipline, structure. I happen to be a structure person. Okay. I believe more rules are better. And I believe that raising kids, more rules are better.
Interesting.
And I don't mean, that we're, putting weight vests on them at age 5 and making them run the block, but, make them be polite, make them be courteous, make them take out the garbage, whatever the responsibilities are to the family and to the bigger team.
Yeah, that's a big one. And kids nowadays are just not, they have less and less responsibilities, and then they grow up older and older, and they don't have that knowledge of what it takes to, hey, make your bed, do the little things that you said will create big things, big change. Outside of your father, who were inspirational individuals in the sports athletic world that you looked up to? I'm sure playing football, you mentioned John Wood, and any others that stick out?
Yeah, I was fortunate to have some pretty good coaches. I actually ran track and field in high school, and I had a track coach that was very inspirational in terms of the mental aspect of sports. And this was in the late 70s, so people really weren't just beginning to figure out this meditation and focusing and positive power, positive thinking, and all those types of things. Of course, your college coach is really instrumental because you spend so much time there.
Right.
And it's such a transformational part of your life, age 18 to 23 or whatever it is, you know. But I love inspirational stories. I follow inspirational stories. I follow leaders in business and in life. I have a fascination with personal growth and how it happens. And so, you know, I've really paid attention. I listen and pay attention to a lot.
If you were to suggest maybe 3 people that every athlete should follow on social media or read their book, are there individuals that you can think of right now?
I mean, I think one of the greatest, you know, inventors of the world is Thomas Edison.
Okay.
You know, the number of patents and the number of times that he failed, you know, and what he did to change the world was really incredible.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think John Wooden did a lot for personal development and growth and building teamwork, you know. And I think, you know, Vince Lombardi, of course, is well thought of in terms of his team building and all of his accomplishments. But, you know, I think about, you know, Bill Belichick currently with the Patriots. And I know it's controversial and people are jealous of winners. But if you think about what he's done for 20 years in the NFL, where mediocrity is what the goal is, right? That's what the NFL wants, is everybody to be 500, right? They don't want a dominant team, and he's defied that, you know. He's doing something that's pretty incredible.
Why is it that the NFL wants that? Just because it makes for parity and makes for that any game anyone could win, and there's more money made in Vegas?
Yeah, I'm a New York Jets fan, and for 50 years I've had no hope. But this year I have hope. We actually have a winning record. So that's what the NFL wants. They want me to continue to watch my team, you know, and not think that it's hopeless.
Well, they are definitely not hopeless this year. Both New York teams are really good, actually. They're both off to some pretty good starts. Who, if you were to make a prediction right now, is winning that Super Bowl this year?
Well, I think, you know, if you watched Philadelphia last night, they looked pretty good.
Right.
And so that's the NFC, I would say right now. Pretty obvious. I don't think it's anything dramatic. And obviously Buffalo on the other side.
Okay.
They're playing really well. Although Patrick Mahomes is a magician, so I don't know. I never count him out.
He took the L last night, so we'll see if they end up winning. I have a feeling they might. They're just so good up and down the field. Okay, so leadership about fitness, diet, nutrition. I'm curious. This is something that I love to bring up on every episode, because when you compile 150 people's opinions and knowledge and resource, from a selfish standpoint, I get to apply them. So I'd love to hear what you have.
Yeah, so I mean, having been an athlete and around athletics my whole life, you know, I observe, and I think I just said that, you know, I do pay attention. And I do get asked from time to time about, you know, what do you do to stay healthy? What do you do to stay fit? Why can't I ever get over the hump? And I have a very simple philosophy. It's called the red dot theory.
Okay.
And it's about consistency. And I tell them to print out a 30-day event calendar, a monthly calendar. And every time they work out, I want them to put a red dot on the calendar. Okay? And at the end of the month, I want you to see how many red dots you had.
Okay.
And if you don't have a lot of red dots, don't tell me that you can't get in shape, right? So it's about discipline and structure, right? And I think moderation, right? Like, I mean, I'm not a fitness expert. I'm not a nutrition expert. But I think, you know, just, you know, moderation, right? You know, be consistent on working out. Be reasonable in your diet. You know, if you have specific health needs, obviously you may have to take care of it. I was in my mid-50s and thought I was in pretty good shape, but I was starting to not feel really well. And I went to the doctor, and she said, you know, tell me about your diet. And I was drinking soda at the time. And the sugar gods got me.
Yeah.
You know, and I stopped drinking soda, and it changed my life from a fitness standpoint
For sure.
and from a health standpoint. And she gave me a really simple advice. Look at the ingredients on everything that you put in your mouth, right? Because I was going to the airport and saying, well, I'm not going to have a breakfast sandwich from McDonald's because that's greasy and it's not good for you. So I'm going to get a yogurt parfait from the, you know, from the store. And you look at the yogurt parfait, it's worse than the McDonald's Big Mac or whatever it is that you're eating. And the other thing I was doing is I was drinking iced tea. And it was worse than the soda.
Yeah.
Right? So until I started looking at the label, look at the label, do the red dots. If you really want to get healthy, moderation in volume and in quality, and be consistent in working out.
Yeah, I fell victim to the iced tea as well. I was a chunky monkey as a kid and had a couple extra iced teas that I definitely didn't need. But that and like increasing protein intake, I think, is huge. I think a lot of people undereat the protein and don't get that quality in before they get all the additional stuff, because it's satiating. I think having that first, and then you can have your fun carbs, whatever, if you're still hungry, but get that protein in, whatever, 0.7 grams per pound of body weight is probably ideal, or what's needed. I love the red dot rule, though. How often do you work out? What's your typical, if you were to red dot 30 days?
Well, I will say, as you get older, you need days off.
Yeah.
And that's something that I had to learn, because I always thought, more was better. Right. And I started in my mid-50s, I stopped running. I had run, 5 marathons and a bunch of 10Ks and all that.
No big deal.
My body just, at my size, I just didn't work anymore. So I started swimming. And it was the first time in my life that bigger, stronger, and faster didn't work. Right? You actually had to slow down, had to be smooth, kind of like golf.
Yeah.
Right? Unless you're, John Daly, bigger, stronger, faster rarely works, And so I really had to take some time off once in a while.
Yeah.
So I try to get between 7 and 9 workouts in 6 days.
Wow. Okay. Good for you. That's a toned down version. 7 to 9 workouts every 6 days. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Good to know.
But it's a combination, right? It's 3 days of strength in the weight room.
Okay.
About 90 minutes. I'm between 50 and 70 miles a week on a bike. Nothing crazy. And 3 to 4 miles in the pool.
Damn. Okay. The pool at least is low impact, but obviously you got the resistance training settled out. Like, it's impressive. Mark, I'm impressed. I'm grateful to have been able to feature you on the Athletes Podcast, share a bit about your story, learn about the Players NIL. Where can people find you on social media? Where can they find the Players NIL, consume that content, purchase the book, purchase the courses if they're able to?
Sure. So everything's on our website, theplayersnil.com. And on social, it's at theplayersnil. So you should be able to find us pretty easily. I'm on LinkedIn. Please go on LinkedIn, follow me. If you go to our website, subscribe to our newsletter. We're putting out content every week in terms of information, latest stories, case studies, telling the stories of the 98%, the kids that every day, in your neighborhood can work on NIL opportunities that maybe are not the Power 5 conference. So the Players NIL, we appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, and as you know, the way we wrap up every episode is we ask what the biggest piece of advice you have for the next generation would be. And I'm sure that you've got a couple different answers, but maybe is there one that sticks out for you in particular?
I think the world of personal branding is here, and I would definitely work on building my personal brand, whether I wanted to be social or whether I wanted to be networking for business or finding a way to college and creating opportunities if you're not a highly recruited athlete. So building a personal brand starting at age 16, I think, is critical.
Amazing. Mark, thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
You got it. Thank you.